All right, so what are we going to report on? What goes into a results section? So in terms of the content of a results section, this is where you finally get to present the findings of your research. And by findings, what we mean is not the conclusions, but what are the actual numbers that we found? What are the actual differences that we found? What are the actual results? So the conclusions are going to come up in the discussion where you tell the reader what the results actually mean. This is where we just simply tell them what the results are. So there's not going to be any sort of interpretation of what we found. There's just going to be reporting of these two groups were different, these two groups were not different, these scores were here and these other scores were here, and that's it. So it's a very straightforward section to write because there's really no added interpretation to it. There's 3 ways to present findings to help your reader understand what's going on. We're going to use 2 of those 3 in our first draft of the results section, and then in your final draft you're going to add the 3rd. So we are going to have description in narrative form in our results section. We're going to tell the reader in as plain language as we can, describe to the reader what happened in our experiment. We're going to use statistical language. So we are going to talk about p-values and f-tests and f-statistics. Those are going to be means as well. We're going to talk about in our results section. And that's also one of the reasons why we're doing it in class, because I will have all that set up ahead of time so you don't have to understand stats, but we will have that in our draft. And then in your final version, you will have either tables or graphs, but for this first draft, we're not going to need graphs or tables, right? So we're just getting stuff down on paper. We'll worry about putting the pictures in there later when you're handing in your final research paper. But for right now, we just want to get the words down, the structure down, the results section pretty much done without any illustrations. All right, so what we're going to be doing in this section, and this will become very apparent why we're doing it this way, is again, we're going to write section number 1. And section number 1 is going to have a very stable structure to it. And parts of section number 1 are going to be repeated over and over and over again. So we have 3 sets of results. We have what happened between false and true memories. We had what happened between singles, pairs, and groups of 3. And we had what happened when those 2 variables interacted with each other. And we are going to report those 3 things in the same way every single time. And the reason we're doing this is because the results section, you probably found this when you've been working through your required readings for your research paper. It's the most challenging section to read. The results section, even for a professional psychologist, after reading hundreds of articles, you slow down during the results section, and you have to take your time, and you have to really think about it. It's a very cognitively involved section to read. So because of that, we're going to try to make it as simple as we can for the reader, and we're going to do this by using structure that is very simple to go through, and importantly, we're going to use repetition, a lot of repetition. And if you take a look at structure and repetition, the best analogy for your results section that you have encountered in your everyday life is a children's book. We are going to write the results section like we're writing a children's book. So if you recall books like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, it uses structure and it uses repetition. So for example, Goldilocks saw 3 bowls of porridge sitting on the kitchen table, 1 big, 1 medium, and 1 small. So you see the structure, 1 this size, 1 this size, and 1 this size, and repetition, 1 big, 1 medium, 1 small. She took a bite from the big bowl. Yow, Goldilocks said, this porridge is too hot. She took a bite from the medium bowl. Ick, she said, this porridge is too cold. She took a bite from the small bowl. Yum, Goldilocks said, this porridge is just right. Notice the repetition. She took a bite from a bowl. Reaction, Goldilocks said, this porridge is something. She took a bite from a bowl. Reaction, she said, this porridge is something. She took a bite from a bowl. Reaction, she said, Goldilocks said, this porridge is just right. It's repetition over and over and over again. And the reason that this is done is because when you're a child and you're learning about narrative form and you're learning about story structure, it's hard to understand these stories. There's a reason children want to hear the same stories over and over and over again, is because they're trying to make sense of it. It still doesn't quite add up to them. They're still trying to process it. And what we do is we use repetition and we use pictures. We're going to do the same thing in our research paper. We're going to use repetition, where we're going to present statistics in the same sort of format as, she tried the big chair first. Oof, Goldilocks said, this chair is too hard. And then you repeat that structure again. She tried the medium-sized chair. Nope, Goldilocks said, this chair is too soft. So we're going to use repetition, and in your final draft, you're going to use pictures, which are the figures. So we're going to have figures in the results section. That's going to be the pictures from the children's book. But importantly, for next time, we're going to use repetition. So again, this is very understandable to a child. Imagine how hard it would be for a child if they were reading this story and it goes, she tried the big chair first. Oof, Goldilocks said, this chair is too hard. She then partook of the medium-sized sitting implement. Nope, Goldilocks uttered. This Chesterfield is far too unsupported, right? What's the child going to be sitting there thinking? The child's going to be like, I'm lost. I'm completely confused. Where's my structure? Where's my repetition? Well, why would we treat children fairly and nicely and then not do it for ourselves as an adult when we're trying to hold on to whatever we can reading that results section? We're going to do the same thing. It's probably going to go against everything that you've learned in writing English essays. So we're going to try to make our results section as boring as possible, as straightforward as possible, by using the same kind of language over and over again. So you might have to fight some inner kind of instincts or reflexes, but we'll do it, and we'll do it together. So the structure, the way that it's going to work, is we're going to start off with a conceptual definition. So we're going to start off with, in class, what were we measuring when we measured percent recall? Were we measuring the speed of memory? How much you could remember? How confident were you in remembering? So think about this. What was the aspect of memory that we were trying to get at when we measured what percentage of the words did you recall correctly? We're also going to, so that's the conceptual definition. We're also going to give the reader the operational definition. So we're going to say this is the concept we were trying to measure, and this is how we measured it. So how did we get to the numbers that we have? When we say that, percent recall was 74%, how did we get to that 74%? How do we get to that actual number? So you'll have to let me know things like, we added up all the correct words that were written down, and then we divided them by the total number of words that were presented. And that gave us percent recall. So start thinking about what it was that percent recall was measuring. How was it that we actually got to the numbers? Those are going to be the conceptual and operational definitions, respectively. Next section of the results section is going to be a summary in very plain English. No jargon, no overcomplicated language. It would be as if an intelligent individual with unfamiliar with the experiment but with a psychology background came to you and said, I heard you did this experiment in P211. What did you find? What were your results? That's where we want this summary of the interaction in plain English. So we're going to say things like, for the correct words, singles, pairs, and triples had the same amount of recall. But for the incorrect words, singles recalled this, pairs recalled that. So as simple as we can, just presenting the information in a narrative form in plain English. Once we have that narrative form in plain English, once we've given everybody a synopsis of what it is that they can expect, then we can go into the details. It's almost as if in the Goldilocks and the Three Bears story, you say, oh, well, there was this girl named Goldilocks. She went to this cottage that was owned by three bears. She tried some food. She tried their beds. And in the end, they came home and they kicked her out. We give them a synopsis of everything. Now they have a structure in their mind about what in general occurred. Then we get technical on them. Then we go into the results. And we say, oh, there was porridge. One was too hot. One was medium. One was too cold. There were beds. One was too hard. One was too soft. One was just right. That's where we get into the, oh, this difference had this F statistic. This difference had this p-value. And I will help a lot with the technical results. We'll have those all ready to go and already in the draft when we're going. But that's the kind of structure that we need. What happened, and then here's the technical results. Here's the evidence for it. All right. Any questions on that so far? All right. In terms of repetition, once we get into the technical section, this is how everything is going to go. We are first going to say whether there was evidence of an effect or no evidence of an effect. So, for example, if we were looking at the percent recall between correct words and incorrect words, right? Correct memories and false memories. You'll remember, hopefully, that false memories were recalled less than correct memories. So there was a difference. So what we would say, when we were writing up that section, would be that there was evidence of an effect. Yes, there was evidence of an effect. That is followed up by the statistical jargon. This is your evidence. You're making a claim. There was evidence of an effect. You then follow it up with statistics and numbers that would indicate, yes, here's your evidence that there actually was an effect. You don't have to know at all what those numbers mean yet. That's for P354 when you take your stats course. But we will have those numbers in there. And that's part of the reason, again, why we're doing this together as a class. So we got evidence of the effect, statistical jargon, and then we follow it up one more time with an English explanation. So if we had the result where we had correct items, and then we had the critical items, and we have percent recall, and that, I believe, was about 70%, and that one was about 40%. When we're writing that up, we will say, yes, there was evidence of an effect between correct and critical items. Here's your stats. F equals this, P equals this. And the English explanation. Correct items were recalled at a higher rate than critical items. And that's it. That's the section for that particular difference. And then we do that. Oh, and then the last thing is you say, see the figure. We won't actually put figures in there, but it's a good idea to have that, oh, go see figure 1, just English language in there so that you know where to put your figures later on. And this is what we're going to do for correct versus critical. This is what we're going to do for singles versus pairs versus groups of 3. And this is also what we're going to do for the effect of singles, pairs, and groups of 3 on correct words, and singles, pairs, and groups of 3 on critical words. We're going to put all of that in the same repeated structure. And you're going to see once we write one of these, it's going to be very simple to write, the other two. All right, in terms of APA requirements, when I used to make students buy the APA manual, we used to do this, a little bit of this in class. Now that we have it all online, you'll be doing more of this on your own as part of the homework assignment. But just so that we know the APA requirements, first off, all the previous requirements are still in effect. So you will see that this results section has headings. It's got different levels of headings. It's got a level 1 heading and it's got level 2 headings. We are going to, and actually it's got level 3 headings, we're going to make sure that those headings are formatted. still has to have the 1-inch margins all around, still has to be Times New Roman font. So all the previous requirements that we introduced in the method section, they're still in play. New requirements are going to be the following. For organization of the report, again, I'm going to do that a lot. That's why we're doing this as a class. But I would suggest rereading organization of a report, specifically the results section that starts on page 325 if your textbook is formatted the same way that mine is. In terms of abbreviations, that starts on page 341. We're going to introduce abbreviations. We might use them, we might not. We are going to use some statistical terms. So again, knowing how to format, that is going to be one of the new things for the results section. So reporting numbers and statistics, this is actually going to be the one that is more prevalent or more relevant. We're going to report statistical terms. We're going to report p-values and f-statistics and means. We're going to report numbers. We're going to report percent recall. We're going to report, again, the p-values. We're going to report the f-statistics. So once we're done with the actual writing of it in class, as part of the homework assignment for this draft, you're going to go through it and say, all right, let me make sure that each of these sentences are in the proper APA format. Let me make sure that the numbers and the statistics are properly formatted. And then those are the only new things. Mostly it's going to be the reporting numbers and statistics. And then also remember double space, Times New Roman 12-point font, 1-inch margins all around. All right, so that is going to be the results section. There's your initial overview. Any questions on that?